Good morning. My name is Tim Januski and I'm CEO of the Alberta Library. And this morning I'm pleased to introduce our webinar presenter, Heather Klimchuk. Heather was first elected in 2008 as member of the Legislative Assembly for Edmonton-Glenora and served proudly until 2015. Heather served as Minister of Human Services, Culture and Service Alberta. Throughout this time, her appointments included Treasury Board, Agenda and Priorities, Operations Committees, and Deputy Government House Leader. And as a writer and community connector, Heather publishes a bi-monthly op-ed column for Post Media Network. Just a couple of housekeeping details before we begin the webinar presentation. To keep our webinar moving this morning, we will hold all questions until the end of the webinar. And you can ask questions in the chat function, and a TAL staff member will read them to Heather. So over to you, Heather, and welcome this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. Wonderful to be here. And I'm thrilled to be here and connect with so many community champions across Alberta. And thank you for all you do to ensure our libraries continue to welcome all and support those folks who need extra assistance. I will speak for about 35 minutes or so, not really sure how long it's going to be, and then I would certainly love some questions. So the title of this webinar is Cultivating Connections Through Strategic Advocacy. And again, you all have more power and influence than you think you do. I lost it. Okay, fun fact. Sorry. There we go, fun fact. When you research a topic like advocacy, there's all sorts of stats. And one of the fascinating things is that Board Source Leading with Intent, a national index of public policy, indicates that only 52% of board members are actively involved in advocating for their mission or organization. So I look at your board. You're a 10-person board with 48 members. So the question that I think you might need to ask yourself, maybe at your next meeting or retreat, is how often do you talk as a board to check in and share best practices? Advocacy is not a bad word, and I view it as a positive action. So definitions. Often when I write, I will go to Wikipedia or other sources and look at a definition. So if you look at the definition of advocacy according to Wikipedia, it's an activity by an individual or group which aims to influence decisions within political, economic, social systems and institutions. And of course, it can include many activities that a person or organization undertakes, like media campaigns, public speaking, commissioning, and publishing research. Advocacy is also about the effective use of social media to facilitate civic engagement and collective action. So again, this is one definition, and there are many others. What's very interesting to me over these past few years is the explosive growth of social media. It is free and very effective, also effective in a positive and a negative way, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, or TikTok. But it does take time to ensure your messages are well thought out. So my advice to you is to be very careful. I look at TAL and their communication strategy and how they roll things out. There's obviously a very cohesive plan. So when you look at your own library or the organization you're with, my advice is to be careful and to respect it. We know the social media is full of information, misinformation, then disinformation. And I wrote an article about that earlier this year and talked about the danger of it all. And misinformation is just plain misinformation, but disinformation is a deliberate spread of the wrong information. So I think moving forward for many of the libraries across Alberta, you're in a very unique position to be able to advocate, but just be careful and get advice. Look at some of the people who are using social media very, very well. Cultivating connections. You know, in your community, you are all so many things, and I've written down a few things, so I apologize if I've left out something. but you're an ambassador, you're a business leader, you're a volunteer, you're a philanthropist, you're opinion leaders, you're a coach, maybe you're dancers. And of course, the many personal roles you have like mom, dad, uncle, aunt, grandparent, brother, sister, caregiver, guardian, or however you define yourself. But most of all, as a board member, you are a volunteer. Of course, the board members who are volunteers. And I look at the challenges in urban versus rural. In the urban connections, you have MPs, you have MLAs, you have senior leadership roles in provincial government, and of course you have the mayors and municipal councillors. So it's certainly complex in that way. Rural is a little bit more complex too, because you have the different layers of rural government, MPs, MLAs, constituency assistants, mayors, local police chiefs, councillors, reeves, and other elected officials. So it may seem that these connections are obvious, and they are. I mean, they're there right in front of you. But at the end of the day, you're expected to live, breathe, and think about TAL as much as possible, I think. You are deep thinkers based on a strategy and mission, and also you are vigilant providers of oversight, and you believe in your purpose and vision. And when I look at the purpose and vision of TAL and what you do, it's incredible, because you are so far ahead in terms of sharing information and cultivating those connections. I look at your purpose, which is supporting and enabling members access to the technologies, licensing solutions, and related services necessary to better serve their users. And your vision, recognized for its membership focus and service, its organizational excellence, and its work with organizations that share TAL's interests in empowering Albertans through equitable access to library and information services. And in these times, these economic times we're in, we are often told to do more with less. And that's tough. That can be really tough. But I think you're in a great position to continue to do more with less in terms of celebrating what you do every day in your libraries across Alberta. Now, what does my MLA want to hear from me? It's cool because when I was an MLA, I enjoyed every moment of it. It was just such a privilege to serve and to connect with people. And sometimes MLAs may not want to hear the good, bad, and the ugly, but it's really important that the MLA hears everything. And I was not afraid to meet with people and to kind of hear what was on people's minds. And I remember meetings where I had to tell people no, and it was tough. But I always listened, and we always shook hands after. And I think the role of advocacy is to be positive. You may not sometimes want to hear the information, but you need to be positive and be persistent. So MLAs want to connect with you as much as possible. And they want you to connect with their constituency assistant as well, and the ministerial office when relevant. I was very fortunate to have a constituency assistant, Josie, in my office in Edmonton, Glenora. She was gold. She was with me for 7 years. And I'm telling you, she knew exactly what was going on. She knew she could follow up. She could help solve complex problems, and then work with me to kind of meet when necessary and to help people. So constituency assistants are gold. And even there's times when you send an invite and the MLA may not be able to be there, but perhaps the constituency assistant would want to come to your event. So be persistent. The other thing you could do is to send regular updates to the minister and local MLA without asking for anything. So maybe send an update about an activity in your library. Maybe you're preparing to have an author in, or maybe you're doing linking it with an arts and craft kind of event with an artist. Invite them, but also if they can't come, send an update to the minister and the MLA saying, hey, this is what's going on in our library. Just wanted you to know, without asking for a meeting, without asking for anything. Sometimes for me, that was really powerful because I could see what was going on in their organization and go, wow, now that's cool. I need to connect with that. And then following up and realizing that hey, the MLA wants to attend, so it's great. You could also design a special event with families that assists the MLA to connect as well. And sometimes the MLA will bring his or her family. I believe that, as we all know, serving is hard work. And when you're an MLA, especially in rural Alberta, because of the driving you have to do, family time is precious. So libraries are, again, in a unique position because you can have events and you can do really cool things and engage the MLA and his or her family at a very different level. Now, as we move towards Budget 2020, you've all survived Budget 2019, but Budget 2020 is going to be the stickler. So your MLA and the minister will require more evidence that your library is absolutely essential. Now, that might be brutal advice, but I'm being very open with you. I think that we are all open to new ideas of how to do more with less, but make sure that your stories are strong. When I was an MLA, I toured in Southern Alberta, and of course, we know there's a lot of new immigrants that are going to Southern Alberta, all over Alberta, and I was struck by some of the stories I heard, and some of the stories of what libraries do for our new Albertans. Powerful things that perhaps people aren't aware of. So I would encourage you to develop those stories of real life people, their circumstances and their challenges, and what a library can do for them. I just think that you are in such a unique position, and even some of the libraries that have books in different languages. So the fact that you're very welcoming is just a wonderful opportunity. Okay, the next slide is about board and local library engagement. Some of this information is from a woman by the name of Ann Wallestad, who writes with the Nonprofit Quarterly. And she gives seminars on all different things, but I just thought her comments were just really, really critical to what you're facing right now in terms of moving towards Budget 2020. She has said, our missions are too important to sit on the sidelines. Policy changes can advance or threaten, and policymakers must understand the impact of their decisions. So again, how do you tell your story? Secondly, the need is too great to ignore. There are always shifts in public funding priorities, and unforeseen consequences can occur. So what is the portion of funding from the province that you get? I believe most libraries are funded about 1/3 in terms from the provincial government. So maybe you need to look at the possibility of, if you had to do with less, what would you do? Maybe that's something you could talk about at the board level and at the local level. And then the third point she made is that you are the folks decision makers need to hear from, as well as information from community leaders and constituents. So you need to be heard, and your voice needs to be heard. And the last point she made is that board members are perceived as volunteers. Within Alberta, we have something called the Lobbyist Act, which you must register when you go to, if you're a company or an organization. Because you are in a unique position, because some of you are board members and volunteers, of course some of you are paid staff, keep that in mind as you connect with people. So it's, again, you have the power to partner and connect. And I believe that some of the things that the board could do is make advocacy a board priority, perhaps a sense of mission. What's your mission? And secondly, solidly support by demonstrating the impact of short-sighted decisions. So we all know that government can make short-sighted decisions. So maybe give an example and give a solution as to how you would fix it. Oftentimes, MLAs want to hear solutions, and that helps them, right? The third area is sustain the support through a strategic approach. So you need to focus on a couple of things. The legislative and policy agenda. There are a number of different committees that sit all year round. The House is sitting now until December 12th. It will adjourn then, and then it'll start up again in February. and get ready for the budget, which will be likely brought in late February. So these are all things that you can kind of track. And I know that MLAs want to hear what's really happening. They want to hear from the volunteers, they want to hear from the staff, and you are all the best sources. And I think these next few months, it's not about, survival, maybe is too strong of a word, but I believe that you're in a great position to certainly advocate as well. The next slide, Annual Advocacy Day. I would call that, I met my library. Now, you might think it's corny, but I know that the Alberta Museums Association does this very well. So I'd encourage you to check out their website, and they have a day every year or a week where you can visit your museums and get to know your museums in all your communities. And they've done some great advocacy as well. So even having an event with politicians and community leaders reading their favorite book. We all have favorite books. I mean, my favorite books are like Dr. Seuss and all of that when I go back to my kids. Start a reading program and challenge others to support different authors. I think that's a wonderful thing. Another thing, recruit champions to assist you in building connections. Every community, big, medium, or small, has champions. We all know them. They're the ones that show up at the hockey rink or the curling rink. They're the ones that organize all those great breakfasts and barbecues and parades. Find those champions, and they're going to help you build connections and help you perhaps get to the MLA, because they might know him or her. I would consider also, I don't know if you do this, I'll have to check with Tim after, consider organizing an annual advocacy day at the Alberta Legislature. The Alberta Museums Association has done that as well. And typically when the House sits, there's a break. And during that break, over the supper hour, there's often events that go on at the Royal Glenora Club or close by at other locations, where you can come and host the MLAs on their break and have a meeting with them. It's usually a very quick, under an hour. So that's a possibility. And you'd have to check with the Capital Region Caucus would probably be the best position with the UCP party. And I find the most simple events are the most powerful. For example, like sharing the history of the area. Many of the libraries I know are in older buildings. So I think it's a chance to connect history and libraries together at the same moment. And we know that there's been some changes within the budget with respect to our history and how we protect it. So I think that might be a cool chance for libraries to jump kind of into that void. It's really important to invite current MLAs, but also the former MLAs. There's a lot of former MLAs that are around and still want to be engaged. They still want to help, and they have a lot of knowledge. And I know that. And I did a former MLA panel with with former MLAs at the Federal Building on Monday, talking about what it's like to be an MLA with teachers and helping them when they teach democracy. So there's all these different things you can do, and breakfasts, barbecues, parades, and I'd say just keep developing your stories. The next one is called Your New Best Friends. And I put this out there. I didn't do a slide for this because I just wanted to be really frank with you about who your new best friends are in terms of moving forward to Budget 2020. Number one, your constituency assistant in the local office. Popping in to say hi and here's what's happening at the library is wonderful. They really, really appreciate that because it helps them connect with the MLA. Most MLAs are in their constituencies on the weekends when the House is sitting. So they're there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So they have a really short window to absorb all the things that are going on in their constituency. So if you can connect with a constituency assistant on a weekly basis or monthly basis and say, here's what's happening at my library, and I think that he or she would want to be part of that. The second area is the staff in the minister's office if the MLA is a minister. So some of your representatives are ministers. especially out in rural Alberta. So I would make sure that you get to know the chief of staff. The chief of staffs are unique in that they're the ones that have a lot of access to the ministers, and they know and understand their schedules. They know their limitations, but they also know kind of what their favorite things are to do. And I think that the chief of staff, and of course there's a scheduler, there's the policy person, there's the EA, there's lots of people in there that you should get to know, providing that your MLA is a minister. So if not, you work through the constituency office. Also connecting with senior leadership in the Department of Municipal Affairs. The deputy ministers and the ADMs, the assistant deputy ministers, often travel across Alberta. That's their job. And usually, sometimes with the minister, sometimes not. And that's a really great chance to engage that level of governance within the libraries. And there's a new deputy minister of municipal affairs, Paul Winnick, who's a former military man, a wonderful man. I know him personally. And he's the kind of guy that will give you the time and maybe a phone call if he can't be in your community. Alberta's a big place to get around. The other area that another new best friend is the former MLA association that I spoke about previously. Believe it or not, there are, over 400 former MLAs that are still alive. There's a lot of MLAs that have passed on. Now, there's a lot of us around, and we would love to provide support and help you connect. So when you have an event, invite the former MLA. And if that former MLA is from another political party, that doesn't matter. Once an MLA, always an MLA. And they all have connections. And I would say personally, it is deeply appreciated to be invited and included. Because sometimes when you move on for whatever reason, sometimes you feel like you're forgotten. So use those connections. Another new best friend is study the legislative agenda and look at the committee structure. Municipal affairs is probably under the family and education committee. So we know that what happens with the budget process is it goes through all of those committees, goes through Treasury Board, goes through Cabinet, and then Treasury Board signs off on it. Of course, the Minister Taves. And all of that happens now into early February or late January, depends on when they're going to present the budget. It's not public yet. I believe that the budget will be passed before March 31st so that there will not have to be a supplementary estimate to run the government. That means this last year, since there was no budget passed by March 31st, the government has had to have a supplementary estimate and borrow money to run the government. The best way is to pass the budget by March 31st, which is the end of the budget year, and then you can run the government without doing those estimates. Another new best friend, I think, is the Premier. Invite the Premier to your events. Who knows? He travels everywhere. He is a hard worker, as we all know, and some of his decisions you may or may not agree with, but I totally support him on his ability to connect with Albertans. And I think that you should invite him, and you could be surprised. You could be very surprised. And work with if you want to invite the Premier, work with your local MLA. Now, if the local MLA is a UCP member, it's going to be a bit easier. But I would work with your local MLA in the Premier's office and see what happens. I would say that when the House is not sitting, there's great opportunities. So January, February could be a good month to have the Premier at your library. So this last slide is a Wordle. I love Wordles because you can look at it and look at all the words in there. Perspective, trust, authentic. One thing that I know is the authenticity that's present in all your libraries across Alberta. You guys walk the talk, you deal with everything, whether it's babies or moms or someone having some deep social issues or a new immigrant just wanting to maybe get a book and doesn't know what to do. So the authenticity that you provide every day is absolutely wonderful. So take a look at those words in there, you know, trust, making connections, perspective, understanding, all of those things. I just think that this applies to all of that. And of course, never underestimate what you bring to the table. I think sometimes we all get caught up in what other people do, but look at yourself. I mean, whether you're whoever you are, however you define yourself, you do so many amazing things. And I think that example for me is when I got elected in 2008, I ran in 2008 and I won in Edmonton-Glenora by 99 votes. And the column in the paper was stay-at-home mom becomes a minister. And my first portfolio was Minister of Service Alberta. And at the time, I was, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. When I reflect on that now, I thought, yeah, stay-at-home moms bring a lot to the table. So I was a minister the entire time I was in the MLA. So whatever you do in your life, please don't underestimate your connections. Something that I do as a writer, as I'm going through my journey of after politics, I write for the Edmonton Journal for Post Media. And I submit a column every 2 weeks, and I more or less can write whatever's on my mind, which is very cool. I started this in January, and I've been doing it till now, and they keep publishing my articles. There's one today that I wrote about don't be led by the theater of politics and some of the comments that are being made out there about Alberta and about Confederation. But I did write an article about libraries in August, and I know some of you read it, but it was a pretty passionate article for me, and talking about libraries being an essential investment, you know, in our budget. And I think the current budget reflects that most definitely. And one of the things that I mentioned was the open door policy at libraries, and I said, and an open door policy at libraries is why those that need the most help keep coming back, and that is a good thing. From a funding perspective, this should be viewed as a positive, necessary investment. I also know that the libraries across Alberta all have the SuperNet high-speed broadband connection, something that I worked really hard on in Service Alberta to ensure that the bandwidth was being upgraded. I'm not sure where that is right now, but we all know that video conferencing, Skyping, all those things are necessary to help keep you connected across Alberta. So we know that what you're doing here with TAL and the sharing and the collaborative library policies that are going on, those are happening, and that was because of a report called Framework for the Future, Positioning Alberta Libraries in the 21st Century, that former MLAs, some of my colleagues worked on, Jeff Johnson, Fred Horn, and Teresa Wupa. And there was 18 recommendations that were centered around integration, province-wide collaboration, innovation, and capitalizing on technology. What's really cool is what you're doing here at TAL. I think you're in a great position to keep doing the good work and to keep your members connected. And of course, it's a cross-government approach as well. There's so many libraries in our province, and I look at the school libraries as well. Something that I guess frustrated me is when our school libraries would close every summer, and how it's just such a waste of energy and a waste of books just sitting there in their sad closed libraries. But that could be another conversation when we look at co-locating. Maybe there's some ideas there. My friend, a good friend of mine, is the CEO of the Edmonton Public Library, Pilar Martinez, and she said in her 2018 annual report that even with the digital age, libraries are thriving like never before as community hubs that provide learning, literacy, and access to information for everyone. And I don't have to say that. You guys live and breathe that every day. And again, I appreciate that so much. I believe that libraries are the common community touchstone where you will always feel welcome no matter where you are from. So I want to help you to make sure that your doors stay open across Alberta. So I just want to say I thank you for your time. It's about 30 minutes. It's not bad. But I'm one of those folks who loves questions. And I look forward to an interaction with you. And I hope that I've helped you provide some information and to work with your local MLAs. I think it's November. You're in a really good position to do some really good work. But I guess what you can maybe start working on sooner than later is developing your stories, developing those touch points that MLAs will realize just how critical your library is. I know how critical you are. You don't have to convince me. And Tim and the team here know how important libraries are across Alberta. But it's those little things, and it's those the books and all those things we do. I still do reading week, and I always take my favorite books that my children have, and I still have many of them. So books bind us together. So again, I thank you for your time, and I look forward to all of your questions. Thank you very much.
All right, so I guess we'll just wait a little bit for some people to type some questions, but I have a couple questions myself.
Sure.
So if anybody here wants to reach out and contact you, what would be the best way for them to contact you?
Probably through my email or through LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing your email?
Sure. My email is I'll spell it. It's Heather. It's HeatheRize@gmail.com. Heatherize@gmail.com.
And I had another question, which is you suggested earlier that it would be useful for libraries to share, I guess, letters, just basically what they're up to with the MLAs.
Yeah.
And I was curious, how long or short should these letters be, and like how detailed or dense should they be in order to sort of capture the attention of the target audience?
Yeah, good question. One of the worst things that you can do is send in form letters. And we all know that petitions are filed regularly in the legislature, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you send a form letter into an MLA, there's a form letter response that goes, and you just press, with our technology, just press the button, bing, and it's out there. Not to say that he or she hasn't seen your name. The best thing you could do is original letters that are addressed personally to him or her. You can even, CC the Minister of Municipal Affairs at the bottom, but original letters are the very best to get your message across. And I'm sure many of you do email newsletters, so you could attach your email newsletter, but do a little personal note on the top. Also, one of the things that's becoming back in style, Brian, is writing notes to each other. And it's funny how sometimes when you get a handwritten note in the mail at your home or whatever, it's pretty cool. So do a handwritten note to your MLA about something, or inviting them. And maybe if there's something he or she has done, say, hey, good job on that, but I have a concern I'd like to talk to you about, and try to set it up that way.
Okay, we've got a couple questions here. Is it ever appropriate to talk about money with your MLA, or should the conversation just be focused on general information about libraries?
Really good question. I think it's appropriate to talk about the budgetary challenges for sure, because as you've all heard with the budget and the amount of money it's costing every day, $5 million a day to pay the interest on the debt that we have. It's going to take a long time for sure, but I think that you need to be open with your MLA in terms of your library, how you're funded, your challenges, your savings. What are the things you're doing that are pretty cool that in terms of savings, or having joint events, collaborating with other organizations in your community, whether it's the school or maybe a social organization. helping vulnerable people. I think the collaboration is something that I think Premier would want to see, and of course the MLAs. But don't be afraid to talk about the challenges you're facing. And I think sometimes the worst thing you can say is give me more. I think if you set it up to say, here's what we're doing, how can, help me try to figure out how we can do more with less.
Okay. Do MLAs actually read every letter that is sent to them by citizens and organizations?
Excellent question. MLAs, when you're a minister, you get your correspondence triples and quadruples. I know when I was a minister, I'm one of those, I read everything because that's the way I roll. When you're an MLA, they'll get their correspondence. The constituency assistant will have a folder that I would get every Friday and for the MLA to read. And yes, they do read the letters. There are some MLAs that will even use social media in a positive way to respond back to people, but they do read their letters. Don't ever underestimate that. And they'll read the original letters. They want to hear from you. And sometimes if your message is tough, that's okay. But be respectful. Coach it in terms that you can have a conversation so that afterwards you can agree to disagree, which is okay, or maybe realize that there are some points that he or she has made on your side. So no, they do read their correspondence. Of course, when you're an MLA, you're elected by the people in the constituency, and your first duty is to them. And if you're a minister, being a minister comes second. And that's the way that I know all of them work so hard.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple more questions here. From an individual library board, should the same people all the time be the MLA contact person, or should the board members be different at different times?
Okay, so say that again, Brian.
From an individual library board,
okay,
should the same people all the time be the MLA contact person, or could the board members be different at different times?
That's a really, really good question. The trouble with the world that we live in, and when you're an MLA, is that you can well imagine the amount of people that they meet on a day-to-day basis, right? So sometimes the consistency of having the same person is very, very smart, because that person can build a relationship with the MLA. So I think that having the same contact is smart. But make sure the contact is someone that will actually follow through and do what needs to be done. The worst thing you can have is someone perhaps forgetting, or life gets in the way and you don't make those contacts. So I would have the same person, and maybe switch it up, every year or something, do someone different. But regular, persistent contacts with the same names, that would resonate well with the constituency assistant and the ministerial office as well, and with the MLA.
Okay, and could be our last question, unless anyone else wants to ask another question. Can opposition MLAs actually have an influence in government? Is there a point to asking opposition MLAs for help?
Most certainly. At the end of the day, whoever your MLA is, now it's pretty unique now. We only have two parties, the NDP and the UCP. I mean, previously we had a lot more parties. So no, your MLA represents you. If you have an NDP MLA, you work through the MLA as well. But then also I would encourage you to work with the minister's office in that regard as well, because the minister is the person who's funding the libraries. But your local MLA is very, very important. And they can make a difference. There's all sorts of situations where opposition MLAs have brought forward legislation or ideas, and they have, they've been passed. So no, from a nonpartisan point of view, your local MLA was elected by the constituents in that area, and he or she deserves that respect. And I profoundly believe that. But if you were going to invite the Premier, you might just want to work with the Premier's office in that regard versus your local MLA. That would be a unique circumstance. And of course, your local MLA is on the ground, knowing what's happening in the House and all those things that you need to be aware of for sure. But yeah, no, I mean, the MLAs, no matter what party you are with, MLAs all work hard for their constituents. And when I was elected, I respected all the people that were around me. When you sit in the House and those late nights, and they deserve to be respected at all times.
Okay, and I think this might be our last question here. How much contact is too much contact with MLAs? Do they get tired of hearing from us?
Just writing that down. How much contact is too much contact? That's fascinating. I think that I guess it's how do we define contact? If you're outside their office every day with a sign, that wouldn't be good. But I think that regular contact is absolutely critical. And it doesn't mean that you're going to get a meeting every month, but I would communicate with your e-newsletters, your cards, and at least meet with your MLA. Meet with them at least once, or at least twice a year for sure, just to touch base and see what's happening. I don't think, for me, I had my quote regulars, and they were people that were passionate about whether it was Special Olympics, Winifred Stewart. Those are two organizations that I was really, really involved with. And they were there, and it was positive interactions for the most part. Once in a while, there'd be some issues that we'd have to deal with. But no, I don't think if contact is made in a positive, collaborative way, in a persistent way, I don't think it's too much. You don't phone every day, but no, I think that in terms of connecting with your MLA and the staff, and sometimes connecting with the constituency assistant, you would connect with him or her more than the MLA, and that's okay, because those constituency assistants have the ear of their MLAs. And don't forget, when the MLAs are driving from Edmonton back to their constituencies, they're usually on the phone with their constituency assistant, touching base. What's happening? What's my day like tomorrow? And who has been calling? And who do I need to talk to? And what events am I going to do this weekend? And the second part of that is plan. When you have an event, give them lots of notice. Their schedules are pretty intense, and that's something that I appreciated when I was invited to something that I had lots of notice. And you can't do everything, so don't, I felt bad sometimes, but we're only human. We're all human. We can't do everything.
Okay, and are there advantages or not to having local MLAs and municipal councillors together?
Most definitely, and especially in Edmonton here, the city councillors are very engaged with the new Edmonton Public Library that we're building, which is opening in February, and it's been a great collaborative process. So in rural Alberta, because of the different, you've got the mayor, you've got the reeves, you've got the county councillors, anytime that you can get everyone in one room, fantastic, because it helps the MLA do his or her job and connect with other elected officials. So I think that's a great idea. The challenge is trying to get everyone together. And because the MLA is only in the constituency for a certain time, you should base it around his or her schedule and try to get them together. Chief of police as well is really important in our smaller communities, because those are those champions that do those things. I mean, RCMP, I should take that back, RCMP. But no, I think that anytime you can connect people together, it helps everybody, because you can have a really robust conversation and then talk about it, and people appreciate when you can have those real conversations in the room and everyone's doing it face to face.
All right. I think that is it for all the questions. Thank you very much for all this information. It was very, for me, at least, it was very useful. I'm sure it was very useful for everyone else out there.
Good.
Um,
Well, I thank you, Brian. I haven't done a webinar for quite a while, so this was really exciting for me. I was able to prepare the slides and work on it, and I appreciate, again, I thank you so much for all that you do, and keep up the great work, keep up the faith. Libraries are in a good position, I firmly believe, but we still have to keep telling our story and making sure that MLAs know what's at stake in terms of what if libraries, certain ones have to close or amalgamate or all those things. So I appreciate all that you do, and again, I'm going to conclude by saying never underestimate your connections.
All right, well, thank you very much. And we just got one last note here from Deb Kreiderman at the Grand Prairie Public Library. She just wanted to say, just to pass along her thanks.
Okay.
And yeah, so anyway.
Thank you very much, Grand Prairie. I appreciate that.
All right, I'm going to end the webinar. Thank you, everybody. Take care.